work at this consulting firm, and one of my early clients was Fisher Controls in Marshalltown, Iowa. Not terribly far from here, east of here. And spent some time, enjoyed that very much, learned a great deal. So I learned a lot about the private sector and how you try and make products better and better. And then after that career in the private sector, I left to go off and run the Olympics. And that was the same thing. In the volunteer sector, you got to make things better and better. I came in, we had about almost a $400 million deficit. I went to work to cut our expenses and to bring in new contributions, and we ended up with a significant profit instead of a debt. And then I got into government when I came home. And let me tell you, things never change in government. And they don't get better. If there's a problem, they just add a new program and a new agency. They just keep growing and growing and growing. Instead of cutting back and rethinking and coming up with a better product to solve our challenges, they just go on and on, adding, kludging on additional pieces. And if there's ever been a time in our country's history when we needed to change government, it's now. And so I look at this race in 2008 with great interest, because I want to go to Washington and do what you do in the private sector day in and day out. And that is take Washington apart and then put it back together, just simpler and smarter and smaller. And that's exactly what I intend to do. Now there's a reason to do that, and you've probably recognized that. We're so far ahead of other nations, it's tempting not to have to think about changing anything. Just keep on doing the same thing we've always been doing because we're so far ahead. But the challenges we face today are more significant than the challenges we faced in some respects. There's a new generation of challenges that America faces, and you know some of those. The civilized world is under attack by radical jihadists. And if you look at them carefully, you'll recognize that their intent is not just to attack us, but to attack moderate Islam as well, and to cause the collapse of moderate Islamic governments and to replace them with a religious caliphate. For that to happen, they want to cause the collapse of our nation, our economy, our government, our military. It sounds crazy. I think they are crazy. But they look at our economy and how interdependent it is and how long our supply lines are, and they believe they can bring us down. That's one challenge we face. There's another challenge, and that is an economic challenge. It's going to be tougher competing with Asia. Asia's getting tougher and more competitive than they were in the past. They were so locked in poverty for generations. It's a wonderful thing they're coming out of poverty. And people who were poor and people who couldn't possibly buy our products or services are now able to do so and are coming out of poverty. But it's also a challenge for us because it's going to be harder competing with China and India than it has been competing with Europe. Europe's like us. They like short work weeks, long vacations. We can compete with that. But we're going to be going up against some hard-working folks, and we're going to have to raise the bar in this country. That's a second challenge. Then there are our own domestic challenges. We have some real challenges in our country. We're spending too much money in Washington. We're using too much oil. We could be energy independent, and we're not. And we can get on a track to actually become energy independent, an Apollo project, if you will, Manhattan project, that gets us energy independent. Our schools aren't up to snuff. There used to be a time when everybody looked at Iowa and said, best schools in America, out there in Iowa. And I think our standards as a nation have perhaps not kept up with the rest of the world, because I saw test scores on our kids as they looked at math and science classes. Our kids score in the bottom 10 to 25% of the industrialized nations. I don't see how we lead the world if our kids are not able to compete at the very highest level in the world. And then there's our healthcare challenge. We got 45 million people in this country without health insurance. I want to do something about that in my state. I don't want to have socialized medicine or Hillary care, but I want to make sure we got everybody inside the system. And so we put a system in place that provides private, market-based insurance for all of our citizens. We got other challenges. Our immigration laws don't make sense to me. You see, if you're lucky enough to have great skills and education and want to come to America and apply, good luck. You'll stand in line a long, long time. It's almost impossible to come here. But if you don't have either, you can just walk on in and stay. And that makes no sense at all. So now I know that when we face challenges as a nation, we all want to turn to the source of our strength. And some of my liberal friends would tell me that the source of America's strength is our great government. And we do have a great government. But that's not the source of our strength. I love what Ronald Reagan used to say about liberals' views. He said, it's not that liberals are ignorant, it's just that what they know is wrong. The source of America's strength is not our government. The source of our strength is the American people. Hardworking people, people who are skilled, who are willing to make a sacrifice for the future, people who love their families and love God, Americans who are willing to sacrifice for their nation, who are patriotic, freedom-loving American people, have always been the source of our strength and always will be. And so when it comes time to strengthen America, you don't grow government, you grow the American people and you strengthen them. And how do you do that? Actually, this whole idea of strength is something that should be familiar with to everybody in this room. Most of you here are Republicans. I think that she's laughing. Oh, everybody here is Republican? You're all Republicans. That's it. Well, there are a couple of members of the media here that may come from another party. I don't know. But sometimes, some of them are not all Republicans, some are not. But anyway, in my view, at the core of the Republican Party, at the core of conservative principles, is the philosophy of strength. It is the belief that the world is safe when America is strong. That America is strong when we have a strong military, a strong economy, and strong families. And when we say we want to strengthen America, we say, okay, how do we make sure to have a strong military to protect our lives? How do we make sure to have a strong economy to provide great jobs for us and a great future for our kids and their kids? And how do we make sure and strengthen our families so that the kids that are coming along in the next generation have the values that have always made this the hope of the world? And so strengthening our military, strengthening our economy, and strengthening our families are, for me, the core of what it means to be a Republican. And the reason I'm running for office is that I believe that 25 years in the private sector, and then running the Olympics, and then becoming governor of a somewhat democratic state, has taught me how to change organizations and make them stronger. Now, I haven't always been successful in everything I've done. I've, by and large, been pretty successful. I've learned from my failures as well as my successes. I know that what we need to do is to strengthen America in the three ways I described. How do you strengthen our military? Well, you can tell it's pretty strained these days in Iraq. I'd like to see us have at least 100,000 additional troops in our United States military. I'd like to look at our equipment. It seems to me that we've been depleting our capabilities with our equipment and our armaments over the years, and it's time for us to reinvest and build new equipment. I think we're going to have to raise our spending in the military to purchase equipment that's modern and up to date. We've been spending about 3.8% of our economic activity, our GDP, on the military. It used to be 6% when Ronald Reagan was president. Excuse me. Yes, when Ronald Reagan was president. After he was president, after we won the Cold War, I think a lot of America took what I call, or what Charles Krauthammer rather calls, a holiday from history. We thought there'd never be war again. There'd never be bad people. Well, we were wrong. There are bad people. And after Ronald Reagan was president, we cut our military by 500,000. We cut our spending from 6% of our economic activity to now 3.8%. I think we got to go back at least to 4%. Make sure that we strengthen our military.